Shalom and welcome back to another episode of Ezra International's It's All About the Aliyah. As I've been telling you for over 25 years now, Ezra International has been helping the poorest of the poor, Jewish people, make it home to the land of Israel, the land of their biblical destiny. Hi, I'm your host, Gary Christofero, and today we're going to be talking about the challenges on the ground that we face in the Aliyah. You know, the Aliyah process is a very practical one. There are many things, many services we provide that don't look like miracles, but they truly are part of the greater picture of God regathering his children back to the land of Israel. But first, a reminder of why some of these challenges may exist. I'm going to talk to you from the book of Deuteronomy, the curses that God instructed Moses to convey to the people based on their ability to be obedient or the fact that they would be disobedient. And when they were disobedient, Deuteronomy 28 verse 64 says this: "Then the Lord will scatter you among the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you will serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, wood and stone. And among those nations you shall find no rest, nor shall the sole of your foot have a resting place, but the Lord will give you a trembling heart, failing eyes, and anguish of soul." Now, does that mean that God was going to give the Jewish people a bunch of emotional problems for the rest of their lives? No, I don't believe it means that at all. What I do believe it means is that the conditions on the ground, where in the countries that they will be scattered to, will cause them to never find that complete peace and rest that they would have when they're in the land of Israel, the land where God promised that it would be theirs eternally. Now, I've covered in previous episodes things that have happened in the Holocaust and in the Inquisition, but it doesn't even have to be events that dramatic or tragic to cause the nest to get prickly, so to speak, for those Jewish people in the nations. Every country where Jewish people have lived, there has been a degree of comfort, but inevitably something will come along that causes persecution, and sometimes a lot worse. Something that will come along that cause them to realize that they need to go, to leave. And sometimes that means going into other countries before they ever make it back to the nation of Israel. But eventually, and I'm talking about sometimes over generations, eventually they make their way back to the land because God promised that's what would happen. But first, the challenges that we face are not uncommon to some other organizations, but many are unique to the Aliyah. What I mean by that is, we're an international organization. So, of course, long before COVID brought the Zoom craze, where everybody's communicating through Zoom, we were communicating through Skype and through phone calls because, face it, we're in many nations of the world, and we don't have big city offices. We work in our homes, and we communicate from our homes from places all around the world. And so that in itself has been challenging, but we've done it for over 25 years. We have communicated and been able to coordinate the efforts on the ground. And we meet weekly in a prayer call. And it's those prayer calls that really triggered this episode in my mind, because we talk about the things that are going on, and we talk about prayer points. I send out weekly prayer points in emails, and we talk about the things that are happening on the ground, and we pray about it, and we search, we seek God for guidance and for solutions, and they're often and most often found when we put the work, go to the practical work. But when, making these episodes, these things come to mind. And I wanted to talk to you about them. The challenges that we face often are part of the push factors that I spoke to you about. If you're a regular viewer of this program, you know what I'm talking about. There's a pull factor that I've spoken of, and a push factor that makes Jewish people go home to Israel. The pull factor is simply that homing pigeon spirit that awakens within them at some time during their lifetime. God will speak to their hearts, to their minds, and they realize that to really fulfill their destiny as a Jewish person, they belong in the land of Israel. They want to go there. And that's what I call the pull. But the push factors are something different. And they are often situations like war, anti-Semitism, poverty, even this COVID pandemic. These things will come along and cause a Jewish person to be less comfortable in the country that they're in, and that can be an understatement sometimes. But they end up going to Israel, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's talk about first civil unrest. Civil unrest, this one is near and dear to my heart because I've actually witnessed this firsthand in Ukraine. Starting in 2014, I was there on a visit, and we were actually having meetings with our representatives. And what I witnessed on Crescedic Street was remarkable, was unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. This First, let me tell you what Crescedic Street is. It's a very wide. It was widened after World War II. Very wide street. It's a tourist attraction, really. If you're going to Ukraine, you have to see it. Very wide street with cafes, with shops, with places, with squares, open squares. It's a beautiful portion of the city of Kiev. And the buildings they've all been rebuilt after World War II. World War II, it was destroyed. In fact, when the Red Army fled Kiev, they planted demolitions in the buildings so that when the German army came in, they actually set them off remotely, which was the first time in history that had happened, set them off remotely and blew up many of the buildings, most of the buildings on Crescedic Street. So they've been rebuilt in a post-World War II Stalinist architecture, but very impressive, large buildings. And like I said, it's a shopping area and a very a common walk thoroughfare. I mean, of course, cars are traveling on the street, but this is a place where many people walk and shop and eat outdoors and things of that nature. When I arrived there in 2014, it had been taken over, closed down. The streets have been closed down by this tent city that was created by protesters. When I say tent city, I mean makeshift barricades, tires piled up to where no cars could travel through, wood pallets used for barricades around little compounds with tents in the middle of them, makeshift guard towers. One man was sitting there sharpening a spear when we went by. These guys were there to stay. They were protesting the government. At the time, there was a real push for the Ukrainians to move toward, and it was a very popular push by the citizenry, that they would push to a better relationship with the European Union and pulling more away from Russia. Well, when things weren't going quick enough, fast enough for the citizens, President Yanukovych became very, very unpopular, and these protests began to erupt. And then they became, like I said, very permanent. They were staying until something changed, and then it got violent. 2 weeks after I left, after having viewed these tent cities and all of the protests, organized protests, loudspeakers, all the things that happen in a protest, I left. But the Euromaidan revolution really got violent. When I say Euromaidan, that is named after Maidan Square, which is on Crescedic Street. And it got violent in the form of the government and some, well, maybe we'll never know, who was responsible for some of the sniper attacks, but it was believed to be government forces shooting on the citizens, and 130 people died in these protests. 18 of them were Ukrainian police who were trying to squelch the protests, but the rest were citizens who were taking part, and many of them were shot, which were believed by the government itself. When as this protest continued, it got to the point where President Yanukovych believed that he would not survive it, and he fled to Russia, and a new government was formed. Constitutional amendments that had been removed by Yanukovych were then restored, and people believed now there was hope for real change, to get rid of the corruption, and for a reform to happen in Ukraine. But unfortunately, Ukraine's troubles weren't over. In fact, they probably had just begun. Because what happens when there is power struggles in a country, what happens when there are vacuums in power and financial collapse or calamity, mixed in with that, is it's a real opportunity for war. And what you have in the eastern portion of Ukraine are Russian separatists, those who are sympathetic to Russia, who would prefer to be under Russian rule like they were during the Soviet days. And they didn't need much instigating, which they did get from Putin and his men. Troops were sent in, sometimes quietly, secretly, to infiltrate the Russian separatist sentiments that were already there, and to rise up trouble. And violence began. War broke out in the eastern region of Ukraine, the border between Russia and Ukraine, called the Donbass region, with major cities like Donetsk and Lugansk. This created obvious challenges for the people of Ukraine. First of all, people were dying. Many soldiers were dying. Civilians were dying. And it also created many challenges for us, because now Jewish people were becoming refugees, and we had to get them out. Our drivers, our representatives, were driving across these makeshift borders from Ukraine proper into this region that had been, at the time, they were fighting to take over. The Russian separatists were trying to take the Donbass region, and who knows how much more if they were allowed. We were driving into that region with these vans and helping Jewish people who had their homes destroyed, had nothing left. They left with the shirts on their back. And, our drivers were detained on both sides of the border, by each side, trying to figure out what they were doing. The vans came under fire, bullet fire, small arms and I imagine long guns, but they were shot at. And they fortunately, no one was hit. This went on for a number of years. Our drivers going in and out of this war zone, and we're going to have to now. We were forced to a position to take care of these Jewish people that were coming out, and so war's going on. Refugees are coming out. And we felt totally responsible for the Jewish people that we were pulling out. What would we do? We ended up renting a fish camp along the Dnieper River, and we clothed and fed and housed the Jewish people for months at a time while we were helping them through the Aliyah process. There was one woman that I met there 1 year, and she was still there the following year because her process was taking so long. So we kept people there for the longest period of time. This, I believe, was truly the helping the least of these situation. When we look at Matthew 25, and Yeshua says about taking what you do to the least of these, my brethren. This was really what was going on here, because they had nothing. In fact, I remember visiting the camp, and when one of the refugees, one of the women, found out that I had come from the United States, she came to me and through the interpreter started to tell me these things. Tears running down her face. She said, "We lost everything. We lost everything we owned. We had no hope. We thought life was over. And then Ezra gave us new hope." I mean, isn't that what it's all about? They went from hopelessness to new hope. We kept her safe, and we then was able to get her home to Israel, where she could start, and her family could start a new life. That's what it's all about. And one of the things that she said that I will never forget, and I have to share with you, no matter what country you are watching from today, she said to me, "We were without hope, and I can't believe that there are people in other countries that care enough about us to help us out." And as I said, with tears running down her face, and I gave her a hug, and the gratitude that she was expressing, I want to share that with you today, because if you're an Ezra International donor, these are the type of things that you're accomplishing. These are the people you are helping. So God bless you and thank you for that. And with that, I think we'll pause right here for a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
On the 26th day of September 1941, the following order was posted. All Yids of the city of Kiev and its vicinity must appear on Monday, September 29th by 8 o'clock in the morning. Bring documents, money and valuables, and also warm clothing, linen, etc. Any Yid who does not follow this order and are found elsewhere will be shot. September 29th and 30th of 1941 marked one of the largest massacres of Jewish people in the history of the Holocaust. Kiev, Ukraine Jews were ordered to report and believed that they were going to be relocated, yet they were stripped of their belongings and then of their clothing. They were marched into a ravine 150 meters long, 30 meters wide, and 15 meters deep. Most victims could not have known what was happening until it was too late. By the time they heard the machine gun fire, there was no chance of escape. Over 33,000 Jewish people were massacred at Baba Yar. Nearly 80 years later, Ezra International remembers the tragedy at Baba Yar in Kiev, Ukraine. Anya was saved by her mother, who gave her fake documents to escape just before the massacre, and Ezra International helped Anya finally make Aliyah to Israel. You can help us return the poorest of the poor Jewish people to their biblical homeland. Only $30 per month for a year can make the dream of Aliyah a reality for one Jewish person. Call the number below or go to ezrainternational.org and stand with us as we say, never again.
Okay, before the break, I was telling you about our refugees in the fish camp that we've been helping out. Also, along that same period of time, just at the outbreak of the war, what happened first, if my memory serves me correctly, is that Russia, without a shot, occupied and overtook the Crimean Peninsula. And the Crimean Peninsula that belonged to Ukraine went from Ukrainian to Russian overnight. And what challenges does that create for us? Well, many of the people we had been helping in that region, in the peninsula, had Ukrainian passports, and their process to make Aliyah was to go out through Ukraine. Overnight, they became Russian citizens. Well, thank God we work in both Russia and Ukraine. We were able to get them new passports, Russian passports, and get them out through Russia. One of the beauties of working in more than one country, especially when those two countries are at war. But this actually happened. That was one of our challenges, but thank God we were able to overcome that as well. Now, closed borders, another challenge today, and I'll come back to the situation in Ukraine, but one of the reasons why it's an even bigger issue today is because of COVID-19. We work in one country where I can't share where that is because we're unofficially helping people there and getting them out through into another country because we can work in that country, but the borders are closed. So now we can't get in and out and help. So this is a real challenge. So one of our prayer points is that, soon the borders would reopen. Now, the Donbass region that I spoke to you about because of the Ukraine war, that border that we used to drive across, the one I told you that we even came under gunfire, it's closed now. The Russian separatists have taken the region, and Ukraine doesn't feel it's safe to keep that border open. So how do we then now help the remaining Jewish population get out of that region from cities like Donetsk and Lugansk? Well, they've been creative and they found a way. Now they're driving across the Russian border. They head east instead of west, go across the Russian border, drive through Russia, and then come through another legal border crossing outside of the Donbass region. And then they have to drive to the airport and get the Jewish people home. So it causes many more hours, many more miles or kilometers, if you will, and but yet they do it. They're getting it done. It's happening. So just another challenge that, thank God, we've been able to overcome. As I told you, we had the fish camp and we had many refugees stay there. I want to share with you some of the things that were said when I interviewed these refugees after they made it back to Israel. After we kept them there and cared for them and they finally made it home to Israel, I had an opportunity to go see how they were doing. And I interviewed them, and then the biggest challenges that they were facing was learning Hebrew. But otherwise, they were doing pretty well. But each one of them, I asked the same question: were you planning to make Aliyah before the war? And every one of them said no. And this is why I talk about the push factor, because not one of these people had planned to make Aliyah. They had grown up in Ukraine, they had family there, everything they knew was in Ukraine. But now the war comes along and changes everything. See, this is again. I think hopefully you're seeing why I say there's push factors, because it changes something. It may not be for religious reasons or spiritual reasons, but they go, and God will do the rest once they're at home in Israel. He'll reveal Himself to them. That's how it works. Thank God for that. One other war story that I'll share quickly. If you remember, if you're a regular viewer of this program, you've seen the commercial with a woman we'll call Anya again. She was a Holocaust survivor who had to hide her identity during the war. Her family was home. Her father was off at work. He found out what was happening in Ukraine, that the Nazis were killing the Jews, and he got word back to his family. That was the last thing they heard from him. They never saw him or heard from him again. But thank God he got that word back to them. This woman's mother was able to procure documents that hid their identities. They became Gentiles. They had documents that gave them Gentile names. She said, forget your Jewish name. This is your new name. Live by it now. And that was how they were able to survive the war. Well, now comes 2018 or 2019, whenever it was that I met her. I think it was about 2018. And I hear her story, and she wants to go home to Israel. We had to procure her documents. We had to go to the archives and prove her Jewishness, because she'd been living under a Gentile name all those years. That's the challenge, and that's where Ezra International shines, as the commercial said. And I just wanted to elaborate on that story a little bit, because this was a miraculous thing in my mind, to be able to help a Holocaust survivor get home to Israel finally. Speaking once again of civil unrest, we're watching the situation in Belarus very carefully, because everything that I just told you about what happened in Ukraine, about the protests and then war and the challenges that we face there, we're seeing a mirror of that now in Belarus. As if you remember, I shared with you the fact that Alexander Lukashenko won what was believed to be a corrupt election, where he claimed to get 80% of the vote. A popular candidate in any country getting 80% of the vote is pretty unheard of, but a very unpopular candidate like him, we know that this is not the case. And so there's been the opposition leader has threatened a walkout, a mass labor strike in Belarus, and they've given him till October 25th, 2020, which at the time of this filming is about 11 days from now. And so we're going to watch this very closely. We're watching this with a lot of interest, because if these protests turn violent like they did in Ukraine, the situation could get very ugly in Belarus very soon. Maybe by the time you watch this, that will be the case. We don't know. Another area of prayer for all of us. Another problem that we're having today, this one is largely based on COVID. Some of it is based on the fact of budgeting constraints, but the consul generals are not coming to the countries on a regular basis. Some are only coming once or every 3 to 4 months. This is causing great long lines, long queues of waiting Jewish people, waiting Jewish families that want to get home, and they're getting frustrated and impatient because they can't get in their consular visits. The entire family must go to these consular visits. They have to be interviewed. They have to have all their paperwork in order. And if the consul general does not come, they can't get these meetings in. So we've been helping, in the process with this long wait. But we've got waits in Russia currently up to 4 months, Azerbaijan up to 7 months. I mean, these are unheard of delays, and we're praying, and we're hoping that we can get more. Pray for more consular visits, that Israel would send their consul generals more often, and we can move these lines along, because again, lives are depending on it. Quickly, Transnistria. You may never have heard of Transnistria unless you watched my episode on Moldova. But here's another situation where the documents in Transnistria, or otherwise known as the Pridnestrovian Moldovan Republic, and you've probably never heard of either, but the situation there is like that of the Donbass region in Ukraine. But in this case, people are living their lives recognized by Moldova but as Russian citizens, but really no other country recognizes that. In fact, so when they take their documents, their driver's license, their marriage certificates, or their diplomas, birth certificates, they are not recognized anywhere in any country other than Moldova. And Moldova requires them to come into Moldova and update them, legalize them. And every time they do that, it costs money. And so to get the Jewish people out of Transnistria home to Israel is costing a lot more money, a lot more visits, and we're doing everything we can for them as well. Unfortunately, I'm all out of time. I hope I wasn't too rushed, but I'm out of time. I've got to go. But thank you again for watching. I hope this helps you understand the challenges that we face, and there are many more. But this gives you an idea about the work on the ground and how it's so practical and real, and God is helping us meet those challenges every day. And if you're an Ezra donor, you're helping us meet those challenges every day. God bless you. Thank you. We'll see you next time.